Welcome everyone to Workforce Wednesday. We are so excited to have you join us today. My name is Jackie Buck and I'm the Director of Workforce Strategy at the Department of Employment and Economic Development. Workforce Wednesday is a series, a networking series that focuses on sharing best practices and workforce strategies. It's held the first Wednesday of every month from 11 a.m. to 12 noon. And we also follow that up with an open Q&A session that we call Unplugged. That's from 12 to 12:30, so you'll have an opportunity to stay on for the Unplugged session, in which you can unmute and you can also turn your camera on and ask questions not only of our workforce strategy consultants, but our illustrious panelists for today. I just wanted to ask Adeshewa if you could move us to the next slide. This series is brought to you by our workforce strategy consultants, which there are 6 of them, and they are located throughout the regions of the state. We have these workforce strategy consultants who are helping businesses with your talent attraction and retention strategies. We are all about employers and how we can best serve employers in the area of workforce. Our mission is to help businesses develop innovative workforce solutions by aligning and connecting you to resources throughout the state, by facilitating collaboration, and by leveraging expertise to drive economic equity and growth. And it gives you some examples there of things that we can help you with and we can do with you. Like I said, we have 6 workforce strategy consultants in the different regions of the state. In the Northeast, Chet Bodine. In the Northwest, Chet Bodine. In the Northeast, Sean Husky, who is also going to be our facilitator for today's session. Also in Central is Della Ludwig. And in the metro area is Adeshewa Adesiji. And in the South, Central, and Southwest is Jessica Miller. And the one person who's missing today is Jessica O'Brien, who supports the Southeast region of the state. And she is busy with a commissioner's tour that is happening in Rochester today. So with that, I really would like to take this opportunity to turn it over to Sean Husky, who is the workforce strategy consultant again for the Northeast region and the facilitator for today's Workforce Wednesday session. So if we want to go to the next slide, Adeshewa, and to you, Sean.
Sure, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Workforce Wednesdays. I appreciate everyone who joined us here on Teams, those who have joined us on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, everyone for spending time with us today. As been mentioned a couple times now, my name is Sean Husky. I'll be moderating the panel and asking the questions today. Della Ludwig and Jessica Miller will be moderating the chat, posting helpful links and giving me your questions to pose to our panelists at the end of the roundtable. Also, I want to give a special shout out to the person running our slides, Adeshewa Adesiji. And I want to give a special shout out to Chet Bodine for noticing that the title of our slides were incorrect a couple minutes ago. Thank you, Chet. So another thing I'd like to mention is please stay on for our Unplugged session where you can turn on your microphone and video and join us in the conversation after the meeting. So what are we talking about today? One of the great challenges in workforce today is the shortage of available workers. One approach to address this concern is to attract new residents into your community and new employees to your company, but that's easier said than done. At today's roundtable discussion, we're going to hear from a panel of experts from community organizations, business, and government on the benefits and challenges of resident recruitment and becoming a more welcoming community. Our guests today include Amy Baldwin, Community Development Director for Otter Tail County, Alyssa Hansen, President and CEO of Northspan and North Force, and Len Bakken, Director of Human Resource at Highlife. And I think what we can do now is let's go ahead and drop the slide deck. And then let's go ahead and spotlight our individual speakers. There we go. I think we're all properly set up now. And what I'd like to do is just take a moment to run through everyone's bio, talk a little bit about our speakers today, and then we'll go ahead and jump right into the questions. So I'd like to start with Amy Baldwin. Amy Baldwin is the Community Development Director with Otter Tail County, holding this position since March of 2019. In this role, she works to strengthen communities throughout the county by expanding housing opportunities, promoting business development, and fostering public-private partnerships to advance key initiatives. Prior to joining Otter Tail County, she spent 4 years in community and economic development with the city of Fergus Falls, Minnesota, and also held several roles with the city of Brooklyn Park, Minnesota over nearly a 10-year period. She graduated from the University of North Dakota with a degree in public administration and has a Master of Arts degree in public administration from Hamline University. Amy has earned Economic Development Finance Professional and Housing Development Finance Professional certifications. Through the National Development Council, she's also a member of the Economic Development Association of Minnesota and serves on the board of directors for the Greater Minnesota Partnership. I'm really happy to have Amy here today. And then Alyssa, I'd like to go on to you next. Alyssa Hansen leads Northspan with more than 20 years of experience in business, community, organizational, and economic development across Minnesota and Wisconsin. She invests her time creatively advancing others' capabilities, and Alyssa's role with Northspan, she engages with and elevates every client by facilitating tough conversations and moving organizations forward with action-oriented strategic planning models. She works to create a setting for meaningful communications that respects diverse perspectives, creates joint resolve, and inspires individual and group action. Hansen grew up in central Minnesota and achieved her undergraduate and master's degrees from Northern Arizona University. More recently, she has completed certification coursework with the Institute of Cultural Affairs, USA, and in the technology of participation. She's a certified economic development finance professional with the National Development Council and a graduate of both the Leadership Duluth and Blind and Community Leadership programs. Hansen has also been honored as one of the Duluth News Tribune's 20 under 40, something that I am no longer eligible for, which celebrates professionals who are making a positive impact and working for change in the region. If you're from Duluth, you know that's a very big deal. And last but certainly not least, the gentleman who I'm very glad to have here today, Len Bakken. Len has been in human resources field since 2004 and in the food industry for the last 7 years. He holds a bachelor's degree in organizational management and communication from Concordia University, St. Paul, and is currently the director of human resources for Highlife Foods, a pork processing plant based in Windham, Minnesota. A member of the senior leadership team responsible for directing all human resource activity for 25 HR, payroll, learning and development, safety, and talent acquisition professionals, serving approximately 980 employees on site. Len serves in the community as well. He's currently the board chair for the Southwest Workforce Development Board, and most recently a board member of the Windham Chamber of Commerce. Amy, Alyssa, Len, thank you so much for being here today and participating in this roundtable. So what I'd like to do is just start with a question, kind of talking about you and the organizations that you belong to. I want to give you each an opportunity to talk about your organizations, the work they've done or intend to do around resident recruitment, and just hoping you can give us a brief overview of who you are and the work that you do. I think what we'll do is start with Amy, and then we'll go on to Alyssa, and then we'll go on to Len.
Great. Thanks, Sean. And thanks everyone for joining us today. And thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about what we're doing here in Otter Tail County. So with the focus of today's conversation around workforce recruitment and how to support welcoming communities, I'll kind of give a little bit of background on what Otter Tail County has done, and much of it predates my time with the county. But nearly 5 years ago, the county made the investment with support kind of on a pilot basis had the Blandin Foundation, our local initiative foundation, and others who supported this idea of creating a focused effort around, well, we call it the rural rebound, and hired a staff person into that function to create capacity and develop what that would look like. And that individual's, like I said, been on for almost 5 years. And really the core of the work is based around the background, some of the research of Ben Winchester, if folks are familiar with his work and the rural brain gain, and thinking about how we do that and really use that again as the basis for developing some strategies. And at its core, around resident recruitment, we have a coordinated effort with other areas, and I'll talk a little bit about who those other partners are. But we think about how we do that in the same ways we think about our visitors. And when Otter Tail County is a large tourism industry as well. And so we really have the same messaging, the same marketing, the same outreach that is kind of agnostic between whether it's a visitor or someone coming, to live and hopefully live in the county and be part of our workforce and address some of those challenges that we're having. But, there's kind of that overlapping research and knowledge that the same things that make people want to visit an area are those things that make a person want to live in an area. And so we've really leveraged that research and that idea again of the rural brain gain from Ben Winchester to really develop what that looks like in the county. And so we have 4 strategies that we really focus around. One is putting Otter Tail County on the map, literally, making sure people know that we exist, where we are, those assets that we have to offer, and really highlighting, that it is a great place to be, whether it's to live or visit or, whatever your intent is. The second area of focus, which really has expanded since I came on board and the position that I hold is new to the county as well. And the leadership at the county, the elected officials really saw that there was a need for investment. So if we're doing all this work to put Otter Tail County on the map, we needed to make sure that we had the infrastructure to support people as they're coming into the county. And so within that, we're not talking about traditional infrastructure. Well, we certainly support our roads and bridges and all those things. This is around making sure that there's the housing that people need, the childcare to be able to be in the workforce, and certainly broadband access, which has been especially highlighted, all these things highlighted over the last year and a half. But those types of infrastructure that we think of, that we talk about as one of those needs to successfully support people coming into our area. And then the third area, looking at employer supports and more specifically workforce strategies now that we're building upon. And then finally, another category of welcoming communities, where we try to support both the communities themselves in strategies and activities and actions that create welcoming communities, as well as an organization, what are we doing to make sure that we are, as one of the largest employers in the county, really being supportive in our work within internal. So I'll stop there and just turn it over to Alyssa.
It always takes just a minute on my computer, which is a Mac, to get unmuted because it hates Teams. So bear with me. Hopefully you can all hear me well. I saw a giggle, so I think you can. Yeah, so thanks for having me here today, Sean. I'm the president here at North Span. We're a private consulting company that was created in 1985. We were actually birthed from our Regional Development Commission. So the Arrowhead Regional Development Commission up here, that covers the 7 counties in Northeast Minnesota, helped to start this nonprofit. We're a 501c4 with our own board, total separate organization, to focus on the kind of the community and organizational development components that you might traditionally see in RDCs in different parts of our state. So with that, we do a bunch of different consulting work around organizational, business, and community development. And then we have programmatic areas that serve a geographic, bounded boundary. So one of those is North Force, that started in about 2013, 2014. It actually serves the 7 counties of the Arrowhead, as well as the 3 counties of the South Shore in Wisconsin. So we have a lot of those same issues, and with our port, we have a lot of employment and businesses that have traveled back and across that border every single day from all across the region, not just right in the Twin Ports. So a lot of synergies between those two. So that program was initially started to really home in on how to attract talent to our area. That purpose has not changed much. So it does primarily talent retention and recruitment, and we've built it in a way where it has strategy consultants that work in a geographic area. So we have 2 independent consultants that work for North Force for that program of Northspan. We've built that up over the last 3 years since I've started here. I am only the 2nd president in this organization in 35 years, and I've been here for 3 years. So it's been a lot of change in the last 3 years, and focusing on how really do we do that recruitment and that attraction. So so similar to what Amy was talking about. So that team of people not only is connecting with individuals, those candidates, as well as employers when they're coming into our system, posting those jobs. So they spend that time to connect with them, make sure that they're connecting to the jobs they want to see, but they're also engaged in childcare conversations, housing conversations, broadband conversations. How are we preparing our region, connecting people to those resources? So about a year and a half ago, just pre-COVID, we were working with one of our larger aviation industry partners up here, who obviously, like many of our employers, was struggling to attract talent. And one of the things that we didn't really have as a resource up here was an online place to just find all those things. How do I find the realtors? How do I connect to literally find where I can get kids clothes for the winter? So with partnership with a few employers, we created what's called northbychoice.org. So it's a website that's literally just if you're coming here to connect with people, you want to play, you want to do these things, but you're moving here, or you already live here and cannot find this stuff, it's like an online resource guide. So it's just this resource guide that's kind of stemmed out of North Force to help to connect people to those resources across that same 10-county area. It's a big space that we occupy with that programming, and trying to create a resource that wasn't duplicative to what the chambers are doing or the tourism bureaus, but making sure they're all listed so people can find them more easily. So it's been really interesting and intriguing to see how that work has changed over time, and how when we can connect directly with that candidate, so many times we're able to get them into a job very quickly. So we are not Kelly Services or a placement service, but because we're having those conversations, we're just so much it's easy to quickly get a prospective candidate into a role that fits them. That might not be maybe their traditional where they worked the last 10 or 15 years. We're seeing a lot of transition as people are coming out of COVID and looking to get reemployed. So that's been really interesting part of the work, and how that's kind of shifted, I'd say, in the last 3 years. The other piece that is just starting to launch in our area that's been around longer in some of the other regions is what I'd call that welcoming community programming. Obviously very connected to what North Force does, and our focus as we just begin and launch is trying to connect all the people in our area doing that work that don't necessarily think of it that way. Like our employers who are traveling in cohorts to Puerto Rico to bring whole families back to the North Shore to be employed. They're almost not even thinking about it as welcoming work, but obviously that's what they're doing. They're trying to figure out how to bring these families into the community, and make them feel super comfortable so they want to stay, and their kids want to go here, and they're moving multiple families here sometimes over time. So it's been a lot more about kind of the cultural fluency and understanding of what culture is, to just really start to lay that groundwork of what it means to be welcoming and understanding. So I'll stop there and hand it over to Len.
All right, thank you. A little bit about Highlife Foods. It's a fairly new company. It's a Canadian-based pork processing company. We are their first purchase in the United States. So they do have plants in Mexico and in Canada and some other places. This is their first attempt in the United States. They purchased the plant from Glenn Taylor, so Taylor Corp. Most of you probably heard of him. He started this plant about 5 years ago. Prior to that, it was a beef plant. For some reason in this industry, and I haven't quite figured it out, they want to build these plants in places where nobody lives. So it's really hard to find employees, number one, and number two, find a place for them to live. But it seems to be the biggest challenge in our industry. But they purchased this company in May of 2020. The sale of the company closed the same week that I started. And like I say, it's Canadian-based. They're recognized across Canada as one of the top 50 best managed companies in Canada. So there's a very, very strict focus on what they do for business and the values that they have and what they're passing along to us. Some of the great things that they bring to us are work-life balance, which isn't something that's typical in our industry. In our industry, they like to work 6 days a week, 10-hour days. And this company believes in running things a little bit slower, having great customers, but then having a nice work-life balance. So that's really nice, and that helps us. But with all that being said, they couldn't have picked a worse time to purchase a company. So as you know, COVID had just started getting strong in the area, and it was a one-shift plant, and their plan was to go to a two-shift plan. So let's go from 500 people to 1,000 people during COVID in a place where nobody lives. So those are the challenges that we started with, and not to mention there are 5 or 6 other plants within about a 50 to 100-mile radius, and we're all competing for the same workforce. So those are the big challenges that we had. A little bit more about our product. So we do process hogs. These are Duroc hogs. They're high quality, high premium, a little bit more pH, so there's better color, it's better taste, and our markets are mainly in Asia. So Japan and Korea, most of our stuff is exported over there. We do have about 980 employees right now, so we're up from 500 during this COVID. And with plans to get up to about 1,400, about 60% of our workforce is Spanish speaking. And we, like I said, we're a two-shift plant. Some of the things that we identified right away, we have to attract employees and we have to have a place for them. And housing is almost everywhere, housing is an issue. So we've had to come up with some really out of the box thinking to house our employees. So we've actually have leased a hotel in Mankato. It's an hour's drive from here. We've leased it up to 200 beds, and we have employees that live there. And there's food in there, and this is where they reside, and we bus them to and from work. But this is what we have to do to run our business. And it is very expensive, but again, this is what we have to do to run our business. So this buys us a little time, and we're working very diligently with the community to partner in housing development, apartment developments. Again, I don't, like I said, just building in these areas is bad enough, but now we're throw on top of that Minnesota, right? More regulations, more codes, more. It's just more difficult. So housing is very difficult. Developers don't really care to build here because of all of that extra and the cost for it. So we're partnering with local, the community because we got to bridge that gap. We got to get these folks that live an hour away to be able to live here. 30% of our workforce has a Wyndham zip code. That's not good. We would like that to be 75-80%, especially when winter rolls around. It becomes difficult for the commute. So that's one thing that we've done. Community integration is something that the community picked up on their own. So a group of business leaders in town from organizations they recognize that we're bringing in people from all over the world, and they want to be more welcoming. And so they've started this thing called Community Integration Team, and we're a part of that. We're on that board as well, and just trying to brainstorm ways and how can we make it better for schools, for the kids that are of our employees that are going to be going to school, going to the clinic, understanding how medical works in the United States versus if they come from Mexico or even Puerto Rico or just a different place. So working very hard with that, and that's going to be that's going to take years. But what's great about that is the community kicked it off, and that's usually the first obstacle and the first hard thing to get going is you get community buy-in. That's there now. It's going to roll nicely. Recruitment streams during COVID. It's difficult to find anybody. We could find nobody locally. It was difficult to get them away from competitors because we're in price wage wars. We're in all these packages to entice people to come. So we started hiring directly out of Puerto Rico. Very low unemployment. They're also looking for work, and we started bringing people up. But there's a lot of red tape with that. If anybody's went down there recruiting, you've got to get approval through their Department of Labor and their government, and you really have to assure them that you're going to take care of these folks coming here and take care of them when they get here. So it's a great thing, but it's a lot of work, and it's a little bit more cost because now you have the flying up expense and have to put them up for a while until they can get a few paychecks and make their deposits, and you got to help them find places to live. So we've also implemented what we call a community liaison, somebody that becomes an expert. In this case, we have a community liaison that's an expert on things in Mankato and in Windham, so that they can connect our employees to the services and functions and everything that they need. Finding places to live, finding daycare if it's available, getting to the doctors if they need a doctor, all of that stuff. So Puerto Rico, and then also just trying to take employees from our competitors, which is difficult. Those are the things we've tried. I think we failed miserably at first. We're trying to get to a second shift, trying to double our workforce, and so we're hiring anybody because there's not a lot of people applying, and that in itself offers a lot of challenges to the current workforce that you have. You have to hire good people. You have to be sure that the people that you have want to stay, and if you don't bring somebody that helps the situation, you'll lose them too. So we saw a lot of that over a year's time. During COVID, we hired over 1,000 people during COVID, but we lost over 800. So those are some of the challenges, some of the things that we've done. We've got a lot of things ironed out, a lot of great things working for us. I can say right now, we're full. A lot of our competitors are looking for 300-400 people, but with the things that we've put in place, we're sustainable. Okay, Sean, back over to you.
Thank you so much, Len. That was really amazing, especially when you touched on that you've hired 1,000 and lost 800. I mean, that was an incredible number. I'd actually like to take the same topic and kind of pose it to both Amy and Alyssa as well. I mean, you did a really good job outlining some of the challenges that exist and trying to develop these community initiatives and residential recruitment and things of that nature. I think what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about those challenges with Amy as well. We'll start with Amy and then we'll go on to Alyssa.
Sure, great. So, in general, and not unlike a lot of other areas, Otter Tail County already pre-pandemic had less people looking for work than there were jobs available. We were already upside down as a county based on some of our growing employers. Certainly some in the food industry and a lot of healthcare. Those are manufacturing and healthcare are our two largest industries. And so we were already seeing, really high demand for workers and just not having those workers available, which is what drove initially our policymakers knowing this. And we had looked ahead and we make data-based decisions. That's a lot of how we drive our work and inform it is by looking at the data and whether it's, looking back or looking forward at projections. And we knew we were going to be, furthering having a further challenge around the availability of shrinking labor force. While our population was growing to some degree, we are older than the state as a whole within our county. And so we have more people aging out of the workforce. We're kind of ahead of that unfortunate curve from a labor force perspective. And so again, pre-pandemic, we were already talking about these, this mismatch of workers just and even in the numbers, let alone, the skill sets that those workers might have. So um, so anyway, so that was kind of the, something again, it then further exasperated during the pandemic. As we monitor the data and look at the numbers that we are seeing now of labor force and participation, we are very close to our pre-pandemic numbers. Based on last month's data from DEED, looking at our labor force numbers, we are close to where we were in July of 2019. So we've almost rebounded, but we do still have a growth within our industries and people continuing to age out of the workforce. So so that's kind of the bigger challenge, and how do we try to address that? I already talked about, we think about recruiting people into the area. We know we don't want to just be stealing people from other areas, because that doesn't solve our holistic goal. But we do also want to make sure that we are getting everyone off the sidelines and working productively, those who are here today, making sure we're leveraging those existing folks and helping them maybe navigate challenges, or what barriers do they have to be more fully employed in the workforce. So thinking about that. I talked also already about that infrastructure. So making sure that even as people want to stay, and again, we have a growing population, so we need housing development. Housing was mentioned as an issue, and as we look across the county, both just the pure availability and certainly the affordability of housing are significant challenges. We've seen some growth from a housing perspective in pockets of the county, more so than others, where those communities, and as Len said, being involved and being active from the employer's perspective in trying to advance housing development and housing projects. And so that's where we've seen Perham is the community I'm referencing, and they have a huge manufacturing base there and a really committed employers and leaders within the community who are investing in housing. Right now there's spec single family going up in a town of 2,500, 8 homes under construction, all spec. And to see that, that's not happening in any other community in Otter Tail County. I mean, we are a fairly rural area. And so to see that housing investment has been really, really great to see. And we're supporting it from the county. I mean, we are offering tax abatements for new single family construction for the to help offset some of that tax burden for new homes. And certainly continuing to monitor all of those other infrastructure pieces that I mentioned. Childcare has been an issue, again, availability and affordability for our workers. So, that's again our focus and trying to navigate that, because there isn't a single solution for any of these issues. It isn't something that the government can step in. It isn't being solved by the private market. So how do we bridge that challenge and create these public-private partnerships, provide support where it makes sense from a government lens, and how do we work to activate our other partners in solutions around those areas? So yeah, I think those are some of the challenges and how we're approaching them.
All right, so you want to hear from me too?
Go for it, Alyssa.
All right. I mean, I feel like we work in a lot of rural communities across the 7 counties, into the 3 counties in Wisconsin, and then across Minnesota and Wisconsin, kind of outside of that northeast, northwest area. And I haven't really seen different issues. It's the same issue, held a little different based on the size of the community, the age of the housing, and then that kind of rural versus regional center divide in the developers' willingness or interest in building. So really similar issues, and some of the ones that we see, especially in the attraction side, because you'd be surprised, but Duluth actually grew in population for the first time. It had one bump in the 90s, but since the 60s. So this is the first time where we've seen that the Duluth area in a census go back up. So really interesting to see what that looks like in the communities outside of us, which some of those are having rapid growth. And where we're seeing a really tough spot is where people are moving here and they are finding some housing, and they they're maybe not finding the neighborhood they thought they wanted to live in, but that trailing spouse or partner has been struggling to find that job, even though we have all these job openings. So we often tend to help that kind of trailing spouse or partner find that job and get connected more than the one who's already like coming. So then the housing that's available is kind of split, right? Tends to be very high end or pretty low end and needs a lot of work, especially if you're purchasing. That doesn't seem to be too different between our rural communities and that kind of more regional urban area of the Twin Ports. But you see in the Twin Ports that there are a lot of projects happening from a housing perspective. A lot of them in kind of what I'd call that major downtown core. I think the city has added close to 2,000 or 3,000 units over the last like 5 years. But in our rural areas, it is so much more difficult to find that developer that might not be from the area. And then if they are from the area that want to do something, really trying to keep those homes, workforce available from a price perspective. A lot of them that are getting constructed in our rural communities, once they're done, are over $300,000, and they're selling for $4 million. So they're still selling, and they're selling at even a more inflated price. So, finding that balance with some really interesting programming, like One Roof provides, and they're an organization that does kind of the land trust model. And they've been able to start doing that in more of our rural communities, not just in the Duluth area. So that has been wildly successful, and I don't think they could even keep up on the demand that they have. So trying to find more of those models. And then very similar with childcare. We've had people take jobs in our region and not be able to start that job for 3 to 6 months because they cannot find childcare once they get here. So that can obviously be pretty tough for that employer that thought they had someone in on the first week, and they want to support and keep them. And so that working from home has been an option that started to come up pre-COVID for a lot of those people who had to be able to provide at least partial daycare to their own, or childcare to their own child, if they wanted to start that job right away because they weren't able to find childcare. And that is also no different in Duluth than across kind of the whole rural area. We're seeing pockets of great development that's starting to change that demand. In our rural communities where those projects are being built and having some success, you're seeing population move. So just even in the last 3 years, where childcare slots have become available, those communities have gained residents where others have lost. So just in the same county, same 5 kind of communities near each other. So those issues, I think, are duplicated across every part of Minnesota. And those are kind of those three big ones for us anyways, is finding that housing for that person, finding that childcare, and then finding the job for the other component of that family unit. I'll pass it back to you.
Well, I want to give Len an opportunity to add anything if you'd like to, or if not, we can move on to the next question. That's just fine as well. I know Len touched on a lot of these comments in his previous.
Yeah, I'd just say, we're talking about challenges. There's 2 more things that I would add. You got to be competitive, and that's usually a hard thing for a business to do, right? It's going to cost money to get your wages in line with everyone else. And a lot of companies are going to struggle with getting that approval or trying to ask for that approval, but you're hurting yourself if you don't. You have to be competitive. So, making sure that we're paying people appropriately for the skills that they have, because if we don't, they're going to go right down the street to the next person. And then, getting to know your people. One of the biggest reasons for terminations so we had 800 terminations over that year period where we hired 1,000. Most of those were no call, no shows, which means we really don't know why they left. And the biggest challenge with that is you don't know what to improve. And so one of the things that we had to do to improve that was we had to get out in front of that. So, and we're a larger company and it's easier for us to do, but I would even argue a small company should do this. dedicate somebody or some people to be out there. This is nothing but their job. We call them the We Care team here. Their job is to go out and ask those questions and can find out the concerns and get them to the right people and not solve the problem for them, but get them the right people and make sure there's a resolution to it. And that's paid dividends to us. But a lot of companies are going to say, I don't want to pay somebody that I'm not getting value out of. That's the value. You've got to retain your people. If you can retain your people and they're happy here, they'll recruit for you. They will bring people to come and work with you. So those are the challenges. No call, no shows. We don't know why they're leaving. So we got to find out why they're leaving. And that's just one way of getting ahead of that.
Oh, thank you, Len. Those are really good. Those are really good pieces of advice to take back from this conversation today. I want to kind of build on that again and just say, are there any other things, and especially on the small business component? I know you, Len, you mentioned that there are some things that a large business and small business can do. I know we have a lot of small businesses that watch this on the various media platforms. If we could talk just a little bit more about those best practice ideas and about things that small businesses could do, ways that they could participate in some of the things that Len, you and Alyssa and Amy have all described today. So Amy, we'll go ahead and start with that. And I'm sorry if I phrased the question in an odd way. There's a question in there somewhere, I promise.
Yeah, I'm going to just pause before I jump into that because I do always like to share a story around the childcare that I experienced. As mentioned, I moved here from the Twin Cities to Otter Tail County I guess it's been about 6 years now, and had a toddler at the time. And, coming from the metro, like the idea of not having available childcare was really foreign. I mean, you might not get your first choice or but it came here, had accepted a job in early November and was going to start after the first of the year. So I had almost 2 months to find childcare. I could not find a spot for my toddler. And so I lived that. And I think that I brought that lens for people, that really specific example as we've been working to advance and support childcare in our area. So, and that was again 6 years ago. It hasn't improved. It's still it's challenging. And I think what Alyssa mentioned about those pockets where there's childcare built, we've observed that throughout the county as well, how that's impacted those smaller communities as well. So just a little bit to add on what we're seeing here on that. But as far as what can businesses do, I wrote down some notes in advance thinking about this, and what Len just described, that We Care. I didn't have a cool name for it. I'm going to use that. But that We Care team, I just think that if businesses could dedicate some time, whether depending on the scale and size of your organization, but time to talk to the workers and find out what they value about working there. There's a reason. There's, if you're an employer of choice, that because your workers are hopefully staying with you, and find out why they're there. Why do they continue to show up? Why do they not become no shows? There's something that's driving them to do that. So understanding that, to either leverage that in your recruitment efforts, and making sure you continue to provide that from the retention standpoint. So if it's, whatever it might be that's identified from your workers about why they value working there, why they appreciate it, to kind of double down on that and make sure you're continuing to leverage that. And then some of the things also that Len has talked about, be engaged with what's happening in your community. We are just little microcosm examples of, what's happening in the bigger, throughout the state. There's efforts like what we've been describing, nearly everywhere, if not everywhere, to support individual communities and in regions. So find out, what is happening. Who's the lead on it? Is it, a government unit? Is it a nonprofit? Is it, your initiative foundation? Who's the lead on what there might be, or who could be the lead? Where is there the energy to do something and be part of the solution? Whether it's supporting, the housing development, or a partnership around childcare, maybe not building a childcare facility, but how could you support spots or slots in a new childcare facility? We've seen that with some of our larger and smaller employers who have wanted to ensure that their workers had childcare that would be consistent and quality and reliable for them, and to use as a recruitment for our larger employers, that they secure some of those spots. A pretty small investment for them to have that spot to be able to support a worker starting on day one when they want to start versus 6 months down the road, as we know happens as people are trying to get on wait lists and get their child into a care opportunity. So really thinking about that, we certainly have remote workers too, and we've seen that with the trailing spouse or partner within a family unit, and how to leverage those folks. Not really like, but knowing, like, if you hire somebody and they have that other working adult in their household, how do we leverage them working locally is something we've been thinking about. They and maybe that's what allows them to come, is that one of the people are able to work remotely as they transition to a new geography. But then how do we entice those folks who are working remotely to become engaged in the local workforce? So understanding, as you're hiring people, what is that bigger family unit and what other opportunity might there be to support them working locally? And maybe it's not with you as an organization, but maybe it's someone else. But all the better to get them working locally, again, selfishly, not for not helping the organization where they'd be coming from. But just another thing that we're thinking about and talk to our employers about as well, is understanding, again, knowing the person a little bit more than just hiring them and integrating, doing more of a full integration into your community. So some thoughts there.
Excellent. I know, Alyssa, you've done a ton of work with this. Alyssa's from my area, so I'm very familiar, and the work she's done has been absolutely amazing in this field. So I want to give you an opportunity as well, Alyssa.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say yes and yes to everything that Len and Amy have said, because those small employers, I think, often feel like, what can we do? How do we compete? And we primarily work with those small employers that don't have an HR team, that don't have, or maybe they have one person that's doing 6 of those jobs, and HR is one of them. And one of the things we actually tell them and work with them on that can be hard for somebody to kind of wrap their mind around is actually technically, like, how do they post that job? Where are they posting it? Where do they have the capacity to post it? So, like, we do some of that. We help them with that from a North Force perspective. But when they post it, are they really sharing what the benefits are? Not just medical, dental, etc. But what's the culture of the company, kind of that we care part, right? Like, how do they get involved? How is that, like, what are the opportunities to get involved in their community because they're part of that business? Thinking a little bigger around benefit of being part of that team, not just the benefits that are for your teeth and your mind and your body. And then post the wage. That it seems silly, but so many don't. And those who do, even if they feel that they aren't as competitive as they'd like to be, or they're trying to get more competitive, those that post a wage have like a 70 to 75% higher rate of success getting candidates that want that job. So if candidates don't feel like they're wasting their time, they've had a conversation and it's half the wage they need, or it's more and that it might be intimidating. So we work really hard with those smaller employers to be okay with the fact that the wage that they're paying is what they're paying right now, and they should post it. And then we have a lot of information about really locally what is a competitive wage, not just at that state level, but obviously even in their community based on the data in North Force. So that can be really helpful for them when they're trying to, like, is it a $2 difference or is it a $15 difference to be competitive? So that's been really interesting to be able to share that information with those smaller employers. And then in our region, we are able to do some kind of unique things for them through the North Force program, help them with the kind of some social media posting of those jobs where they might have to pay for that on Indeed or something else. And it's really can be, that can be a burden and not a cost that they can't compete with some of those larger employers who have a budget to do that and they don't. So being able to help them even understand where to put it in social media, why LinkedIn versus Facebook, that kind of thing. So those are some more technical pieces when we work with small employers that can be really helpful, and that I think they kind of just forget, right? Like, we just got to get all these jobs posted. We just got to hire this person. But if you spend that extra like 7 minutes on that job post, you're going to be more likely to get candidates that want the position.
Thank you so much. That was some really good, strong advice. I really appreciate that, Alyssa. I want to give Len another chance to win if he'd like to on a subject. I know we kind of started off with him. If he has any comments, if not, then we can move on to any audience questions.
Yeah, just a couple of things. So totally agree with the being involved, because when we bring an employee, it's not just the work. They didn't come just to work. So you got to have a great place for them to work, but you also have to have a great place for them to live. And that community piece is key. And so as an employer, large or small, you and your leadership team have to take the lead on getting involved in every activity in that community where the employees live. They got to see that you're out there. They got to see your logo, your t-shirts and everything at these events that are in town. They got to see representation on the boards that are in town that are making things better. When they know that you're invested not only in them at work, but also in where they live, that means a lot. And as simple as this sounds, your best recruiters are your people. If your people are happy, they're bringing them to you. They're telling everybody to come and work here. And so that's simple. It's easy to do. It's very low cost in most ways. I mean, yes, you got to have your wage structures right. You got to have good benefits. But if you're caring for your people at work and in the community, you're not going to need to recruit as many. You're going to retain more, and they're going to help you find the rest of the people to come and work. Okay, back to you, Sean.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. I really appreciate those comments. So we have a little bit of time left. I would like to see if we've got any questions from the chat or any questions anybody would like to ask. If not, I'll kick out one more and then we'll move into the unplugged portion. Again, the unplugged portion of the meeting is where the official meeting ends, the recording ends, and then people are able to turn on their cameras, or if they prefer to use chat still, I mean, that's still a viable option, and they can ask any question they'd like to our panelists. But I'd like to see if we have any questions at all. Jessica, Della, anything?
Sean, we do have a question from Liz Jennings here. She is indicating that more job seekers want to know that there are career pathways available for them in the company. And if they take one position and move to the region, is there a future for them too? So wondering how you focus on career pathways and if that's something that you highlight as a benefit for working with the companies that you work with.
Mm-hmm. Alyssa, it looks like you want to take that one, so I'll let you go first.
Sure, I'll start. I'm sure others have ideas, especially Len, but we work really closely with the Career Force partners and the two officers that are up here. And what we've actually done on the back end is they create the content. We actually design it out for them. So we can show those career pathways regardless of the employer, what it would look like to work in that. But then with some of those smaller employers, we've shared, like we're a staff of 5. So we are a small employer. And many of the employers we work with have less than 20 employees. And they often get stuck on, what does a career pathway look like in my organization? So we've shared ours and we've shared a few others, almost like tools. So they could actually even contemplate how to build one in what feels like a really small organization, and also being able to put the wage level on that. So if you're starting here, you're able to see that. I think in a lot of larger organizations that exists, but to be able to work with our Career Force team and Duluth Workforce Board and stuff to build some of those, we're able to put them on our website. So if people see that they're starting in this healthcare career, where it could go and the education, that level that's needed. It's been such a cool effort. I'm hoping we'll see that come back in more of the pathways, because they've really only built out 2 that are like public, but it's helped those smaller employers to take that and be like, oh, here's how I would then build that for my own company, to be able to share that in those job postings. I'm just really smart for those who are able to do that and figure out how to put it in the job posting.
Very cool. Awesome. Thank you for that. Len, Amy, do either one of you want to comment?
Yeah, I can go ahead. I've got two different perspectives on this. So career pathways internal to a company, you've got to be very transparent. Here's the jobs we have, here's what they pay, and understanding and showing that hey, if I want to earn more, I need to learn the skills to go do this, and this is the process to do it. So that's the easy piece inside of a business. It's putting the thought to it, it's documenting it, and not being afraid to show it, and living by it. The other piece is some of these folks have family members, right? So I also serve on the workforce development board, and I do that for a reason. And when I first joined this with the last company I was on, I got a little pushback from my employer saying, why are you helping the area get better training for other jobs and all of this, because it might take some of our people. True. But not everybody. I may have an employee that has a spouse that doesn't want to work here, or a child that doesn't want to work here in this plant. And if there's not an opportunity for them also in the area, then there's a good chance they might find something somewhere else and move, and then I'd lose this employee. So there's that two aspects. Career pathways have to be looked at from both sides of it. You can't be afraid of losing an employee, because actually I think you'll save more than you lose by helping their spouses or their families stay in the area as well.
I apologize. I'll give Amy a chance to respond here in just a moment. But before she does, my whole team would be mad at me if we didn't put out a shout out for the next Workforce Wednesday session. So if our slide master Adeshewa can go ahead and kick that slide deck up.
I've also popped that link for the registration into chat as well.
And Workforce Wednesday for October. October is Manufacturing Month. So we will be focusing a little bit more on manufacturing, but also about diversifying your workforce. So in manufacturing, it is approximately 70% male and 83% white that work in the manufacturing industry. So we will be giving pointers and having a panel discussion talking about how to diversify your workforce and giving some key resources for that. So I hope you can join us on October 6th at 11 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that is going to be facilitated by the amazing Della Ludwig. And I look forward to seeing that. So before we move on real quick, I do want to give Amy a chance to respond if she'd like to.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say I didn't have a lot to add on that topic, so we can carry on.
No problem at all. So then we'll be doing now is we'll be transitioning to our unplug session. For those of you who'd like to stay afterwards and talk a little bit with our panelists directly. I know we've got some questions coming in. If you'd like to have more questions answered, you can certainly use the chat. If you'd prefer to unmute and show your video, we can do that as well to participate. For those of you who are on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, Eric is monitoring the chat comments there and is sending us your questions as they come in. So you're certainly able to still participate on those formats. Eric will post your questions in chat, and I see he's already done so. So we'll just give ourselves a moment to transfer over. Jackie, did you have any final thoughts as we move into this, or? Well, let's make sure that then their questions are able to be answered. So one of the questions that came through from the chat is, it seems like I'm hearing there are more jobs than applicants. I'm an applicant. I've applied to so many jobs and not heard back. I have a graduate degree in education, experience working with refugees, immigrants. I'm looking for country and state jobs. What do I need to do? I think this would be an excellent question to pose to Alyssa and Amy. Let's start with Alyssa and then maybe go on to Amy.
Yeah, it's tough because people are experiencing that. And I think one of the things that and this is not easy and this is not accessible to everyone, but when you're applying for that job, generally if it's a county or state job, which I think is what the person meant, you're putting it through a system, right? And sometimes it can be helpful to ask some questions like at Career Force or others, because those systematic systems that oftentimes county, state, large healthcare employers have are looking for key things. And if you don't hit these key things and how that resume is or how you're filling it out, you don't make it through to the next, like it just chops you out right away. And so getting a little assistance or help from your workforce center near you to help make sure that application's getting put in on that very front level in a way that kind of ticks the boxes can be really helpful. Or if they have any person's email, even if it's an info at that's connected to that application process, I always say direct email as well. So if you're putting it in the system and they have any inkling of where you could also send like, hey, I tried to submit this, making sure it went through, it can be helpful. So those are the kind of those two things in those big systems that we've seen that have helped people get to that next stage, especially when the qualifications are there and like, you meet what they're putting out there. There's no reason you shouldn't have made it to the next stage right now. And I would say also they are overwhelmed because they have a lot of jobs they're trying to fill. And so people definitely fall through the cracks right now, which is really unfortunate because they're trying so hard to fill those roles.
Yeah, I would echo, those pieces on, if the filtering can happen again, and especially in those large organizations. And so, reviewing what that might be, making sure you are hitting, and even just making sure you're submitting it how the instructions say. And I know at least with our organization, we have about 550 to 600 employees at any time, and are constantly, recruiting for different things. But I do know our HR staff is also very willing to talk to candidates after the fact if they don't advance in a process. And, so if you can find that email address or even just calling the organization, you should be able to find an HR contact within it, and hopefully they can get that connection made for you and provide some cues as far as why you may not have advanced in that process. But definitely working, with your local career force center, every geography of the state is represented as you have lots of experts from that angle hosting today and supporting this call. But those would be the tips for that I would suggest as well.
And then Len, can I get your thoughts as an employer to that question?
Yeah, so I think the personal touch is always best. And a system, we don't know who anybody is, and there it is. It could drop through the cracks. I'm not saying call 5 times a day and follow up and see where you're at because you'll annoy somebody. But making a phone call, being positive on that phone call, will get the attention of that recruiter. Who doesn't like to talk to somebody who's positive? That gives you a better chance at least getting to that next step. So I wouldn't overdo it, but make that personal connection and make it a positive one.
Eric, did we have any additional questions from any of the other media platforms? Excellent. Then I think before we get this, oh, go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry.
Sean, I would just like to remind everyone that there will be a survey at after Workforce Wednesday that will go out to those who have listened, and we certainly appreciate their feedback. It really makes a difference on how we structure these in the future, and topics are encouraged. We also just want to say thank you so much to the panelists today formally, and we encourage you, we're excited to have you be part of the Unplugged session as well. And with that, we will close this, give people a minute or two to actually jump off if they don't have time to join us for the Unplugged version, and then we will get started again in just a minute. Thanks.